These are top 10 mind-blowing ancient civilization stories on Joe Rogan.
Episode number 2325, Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers question Egypt's real history and its signs of lost technology.
Number 2328, Joe Rogan and Luke Caverns explore the mysterious Olmecs, a lost civilization full of unanswered questions. 2231, Joe Rogan and Jimmy Corsetti explore Göbekli Tepe, a 12,000-year-old site buried with ancient. 2142, Joe Rogan and Christopher Dunn explore the idea that the Great Pyramid was a power generator. 1400, Joe Rogan and Tony Hinchcliffe discuss the 3,000-year-old Egyptian obelisk mysteriously relocated to New York's Central Park.
Where the Vatican is, there's like this courtyard. They have an Egyptian obelisk that somehow or another they moved from Egypt. I mean, this thing's huge. This huge stone obelisk that's carved, and somehow or another they got it and had it stand up. It's planted in the middle of this little...
Have you seen the one in Central Park?
Is there an Egyptian one from Egypt?
It's huge.
From Egypt?
Yeah.
Whoa. No shit.
Yeah.
When was that one put in?
1881.
Dude, Central Park is pretty fucking amazing. If you're so lucky you can get an apartment that overlooks Central Park, that makes New York a totally different place. Wow, look at that, man.
Yeah.
That's nuts. An Egyptian obelisk put in New York in 1881.
What?
Yeah.
That's nuts.
There's all sorts of hieroglyphs all over
Wow. Nobody tagged it?
it. No. I've only seen it once.
Do you think they have 24-hour guards around that thing?
I don't think so, but they have guards all over New York, so someone might find it quickly. Those cameras and stuff.
I'm amazed that no one did anything to fuck with that. That seems like a little too precious to be just out in the rain and snow. I mean, when was that constructed? Is that like an artifact?
I've looked up this. I don't remember. I've looked it up before. It was like transported there for a very particular reason, but there's there's these little crab claws at the very bottom of it, which are like interesting.
Well, the whole thing's interesting.
The whole thing's cool, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of the hieroglyphs on it, too. That might be one of those things where you could never put that there today. If you said, hey, there's this place in Egypt, I know we can get an obelisk, let's just put it in the middle of Central Park. They'd be like, get the fuck out of here. Cleopatra's Needle.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, people would be like, what? What the fuck are you talking about, man?
What kind
No, you can't take an Egyptian artifact and just leave it in a park.
How do you take a 200-ton thing like that on a boat?
Strap it to your dick. 200-ton granite obelisk, first shifted from vertical to horizontal, nearly crashing to the ground in the process.
Steamship.
Oh my God, they brought on a ship. 200 tons, and you're making the fucking ship.
Plus the 50-ton pedestal.
You'd be looking at everybody on that boat going, don't you eat too much, you fuck. We're barely hanging in here.
Yeah.
32 horses brought it from the banks of the East River into Central Park.
32 horses.
With railroad ramps, I can imagine that day.
God. That's nuts. Took 112 days to move the obelisk from quarantine station to its resting place. Wow.
There you go.
That's weird. It's weird they would just keep it there. Because again, like if you had an obelisk that you found that was an ancient historical object, and you're like, let's just leave it in the park. Put it in the middle of the park. No, you can't do that, you asshole. You have to put a fence around it. You have to put it under glass. This is art that was made thousands of years ago. These people are dead. We don't even know what they were doing.
It's just sitting there.
Episode number 1124, Joe Rogan and Robert Schoch suggest rain erosion proves the Sphinx may be over 12,000 years old.
Well, his work, that DVD series that he did, Magical Egypt, was amazing.
Yeah.
And I had seen your work before that in that Mysteries of the Sphinx thing that was narrated by Charlton Heston.
NBC, 1993. I think in many ways it was the Mystery of the Sphinx that really broke everything open. It brought everything to the public attention. I've had many people tell me, I'm not trying to brag or anything, I'm just saying factually, that this really opened up a new field, if we could put it that way, a new way of looking at things in the popular among the popular public,
Yeah.
press, the popular media, but people around the world versus the academic scholarly journals and the back and forth, that type of thing. You have to remember, I'm a faculty member. I'm at Boston University. I'm an academic. And many of the academics have poo-pooed, should we say, over the years, bringing things to the public, but I think it's been important to do.
Now, what we're talking about for the people that are uninformed is the idea that some of the structures in ancient Egypt are far older than conventional wisdom or conventional modern-day archaeology, modern-day Egyptologists. They would like us to believe that all of this spawned from a very specific time period. And people like John Anthony West and yourself and some other folks like Graham Hancock are proposing that it's entirely possible that there were many different eras of construction in Egypt and that there are some structures that are far, far older than we think.
Yeah, exactly. And this, what I was alluding to, is this really opened up with our work on redating the Great Sphinx.
Yes.
And I think you know the story, but maybe just to summarize in the smallest of nutshells, John Anthony West, before I met him, he became a follower, should we say? I shouldn't say follower because that sounds wrong. That sounds like it's a religion dogma. But he became interested in the work of the late Schwaller de Lubitsch, who passed away in 1961. But he had mentioned in one line that the Sphinx had been weathered by rain. I would say precipitation as a geologist, not wind and sand. So this, if it were true, and it is true, would put the Sphinx back to a much earlier period, which would tie in with Schwaller's work and John Anthony West's subsequent work, that there were indications that dynastic Egypt as we know it, going back to about 3000 BC, was really a legacy of what I call now an earlier cycle of civilization, something that goes back much, much earlier, which at this point I date back to the end of the last ice age. Ice age ended 9700 BC, just to put it in perspective for people.
So when did you first get on board with this? Did John Anthony West come to you? Or?
John Anthony West, okay, so the story goes this way. John Anthony West published Serpent in the Sky, his probably most famous book, first edition, 1979. He was then looking for someone that could really validate or at least assess from a scientific point of view, this theory about the Sphinx, which he had just barely sort of touched the surface based on Schwaller, that maybe it could be older, but this was really a geological question. He mentions that in 1979 in Serpent in the Sky. John Anthony West went on to become very involved with Egypt, and he started traveling to Egypt. He led tours to Egypt. He wrote The Traveler's Key to Ancient Egypt in 1985, also mentions in appendix, I think it was, just the, quote, older Sphinx theory, but really looking for someone to at least assess it scientifically. He met a fellow in Egypt, actually, at the time, Robert Eddy, who is PhD English literature, I believe, something like that. But he was teaching in Cairo, American University in Cairo, I believe. Then he came to Boston University. This is late 1980s. I was and still do teach at Boston University full time. Robert Eddy and myself got to know each other. Robert Eddy mentioned me as a geologist to John Anthony West, and that maybe this was someone who seems fairly knowledgeable, fairly open-minded about things.
Now, at the time, did you have any thoughts on Egypt or the dating?
My interest in Egypt goes way back. I was reading about ancient Egypt when I was literally 6, 7, 8 years old. I had a grandmother who had a wonderful library at the time, and I would go through her library. She had books from the British Museum on ancient Egypt going back to the turn of the century. So I was prepared in the sense I was open to such things, but I didn't imagine getting involved in Egypt in any way professionally.
Did you have any thoughts about the dating of the Sphinx or the pyramids or anything back then before you looked into it?
Yeah, there were two things. So there were two things going on in my head back then, which maybe prepped me for this. Number one, I knew the conventional story. I knew that the Sphinx goes back to 2500 BC, according to the standard Egyptologists. in 1989, which is when I believe it was 1989, I first actually met West in person. I had in my mind that the Egyptologists must be correct because they've studied it. They must know what they're doing. I was coming from an academic point of view. I'm just giving, saying where I'm coming from.
Right.
I had gone to Yale University to get my PhD in geology and geophysics. I was very well grounded in, quote, the status quo academic point of view. So I thought when I first went to Egypt, I would just prove West wrong. I would just prove that the Egyptologists knew what they were talking about. But, and this is an important but, I was also trained in many ways, both as a graduate student and going back to my grandmother, who I had great respect for, and was also very, should we say, liberal and open-minded, but critical. You always have to follow the evidence wherever it goes, and that's always been my rule of thumb, that not everything is always the way people say it is, even if they're, quote, authorities. And something I already knew when I went to Egypt for the first time was that some of the very old Egyptologists in the late 19th, early 20th century had actually suggested that just the way it looks, the feel of the Sphinx, not based on hard evidence, really, that maybe it was older than the pyramids, that maybe it goes back earlier. So I felt that it wasn't all said and done and, pat and sound that the Egyptologists necessarily knew what they were talking about in modern times, because some of the earlier Egyptologists, who they held in very high respect, supposedly, had said different things. Secondly, and I hate to bring this up, but I will because it's part of the background, my grandmother, who I mentioned a second ago, was a theosophist. And if you know anything about theosophy, it also suggests that, maybe there's things that go back earlier.
What is a theosophist?
A theosophist, it's how do I explain it? Have you heard of Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky? No, okay. Whoop, I'm losing my headphones. Theosophy was founded in the late 19th century. It questioned a lot of the materialistic values, a lot of the dogma of science of the time, of religion of the time. It looked to the East in particular, to other philosophies, other worldviews. So basically, it was a way. This is what it did for me, at least. And I'm not a theosophist. I don't want to say I'm a theosophist. But reading theosophical works on top of everything else allowed me, I think, to expand my horizons and to see that maybe the dogma of the day is just that, the dogma of the day, that there are other possibilities. And not that we accept something just because someone said it or because it's old or because it's this religion or that religion or that's supposed to be an ancient culture. But no, you keep everything open, you look at the evidence, and that's really where I was coming from. But my point is that even in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when I first got involved with this, if I looked at it critically, the evidence was not that definitive for the age of the Sphinx. So I was going in with open-minded possibilities, but honestly, when I first went to Egypt with John Anthony West in 1990, I thought, before I got off the plane, that this would be simple, open and shut case. I would prove him wrong in the sense of his assertions that maybe the Sphinx was older. I had no doubt at the time that my colleagues in Egyptology must know what they're talking about, and all of that changed literally within 30, without exaggerating, 30 to 120 seconds of first seeing the Sphinx. Yeah, it really did.
What was your first impression?
Because my first impression of the Sphinx was, now that I saw it on the ground, in person, there was something wrong with the Egyptological dating. Because when you look at the Sphinx, as a geologist with a geological eye, this was not weathered by wind and sand. This was not desert erosion and weathering that I saw on the Sphinx, the body of the Sphinx, which is very difficult to tell because it's been heavily repaired and reworked, but particularly on the walls of what are known as the Sphinx enclosure. The Sphinx enclosure is important because it preserves a lot of the details. And if the audience has not been to Egypt, they should realize that when they carved the Sphinx, it's all solid bedrock. only the head initially was above the ground surface. They carved down into the rock to free up the body, what I call the core body of the Sphinx. And it's that core body and the walls of the enclosure, more or less the quarry around it, if you want to use that term, that show these ancient weathering, precipitation, erosional features that are incompatible with the last 5,000 years of climatic history on the eastern edge of the Sahara. So immediately I knew there was something wrong geologically, had to figure that out. Either this was a weird geological anomaly or something else was going on and the Sphinx might go back to an earlier period. Also, I want to point out that when you look at the Sphinx, and other geologists have looked at this as well, they did not just chip away at the rock to carve the body. More or less, you could have chipped away at the rock with pickaxes and that type of thing, shoveled out chips of rock in baskets. That would have been the easy way. What they did is they carved out huge blocks of stone. And when I say huge, we're talking multi-ton, tens of tons, some of them maybe over 50 tons or more of limestone. They moved those due east of the Sphinx and built what is now known as the Sphinx Temple, which is still there in ruinous condition, and the Valley Temple. So you had these two huge temples. And what is interesting, a lot of people don't realize this or they don't think about it. I think those constructions, which are contemporary with the oldest portion of the Sphinx, in some ways are more impressive if you think about the technology and what went into constructing them than the age of the Sphinx itself. So it's not just the Sphinx, it's also these limestone temples that are associated with it and were built contemporaneously.
So Jamie pulled up two photos here. The first one that he pulled up was a computer image that showed the Sphinx and showed...
Okay, I'm looking at it now, yes. And in this image, what you can see, that's a computer image that's actually from Mystery of the Sphinx, and then there's an inset that's an aerial photograph, the real thing, and that shows how when they were carving the body, they cut out huge blocks and then put them in position to make what's known as the Sphinx Temple, due east of the Sphinx.
And the second image is the Sphinx Temple?
Okay, and you look at this, it says the Sphinx faces due east, the rising sun, and right in front of it is the Sphinx Temple. So this is a humongous temple made out of these huge blocks of stone, which were carved out when they carved the body of the Sphinx. And here you see in this image another picture of the Sphinx Temple.
And so these erosion
and
features that you're looking at here.
And you can see how big they are. You can see how big they are. They're enormous. Okay, these erosion features on the blocks, don't worry about them for the moment.
Okay.
Let's go back to the Sphinx enclosure itself. It's a Sphinx enclosure where you see the rolling, undulating profile, the erosional features. Here you see it in that picture, the vertical fissures, and I know you're familiar with this personally because I've heard you talk about it with John Anthony West, that can only be caused by precipitation. The rocks are like a layer cake, so it takes out the softer layers, it recedes the softer layers, some of the harder layers stick out further, but the water also finds its way down crevices and cracks, natural features that are slightly softer, and it forms these vertical fissures. I want to make the point because a lot of people get confused. They say, couldn't it be rising Nile floods? No. Geologically, that would give a very different signature on the rock. It's not floods coming up from the bottom. It's actually precipitation and rainfall runoff coming from above.
And rainfall for thousands of years?
Well, there's two aspects here. It could be thousands of years. It could be much stronger rainfall, huge flash floods, that type of thing. And part of the story that I hope we'll get to is that initially, I'm jumping around here a little bit.
No worries.
But initially, I was thinking 5,000 to 7,000 BC. That was very conservative based on the geological data, based on the seismic, which we have to get to also. But now I believe we're talking prior to 9,700 BC for the original construction of the Sphinx, and we can talk about why the dating. And at 9,700 BC, we have the end of the Younger Dryas, the end of the glacial epoch, the end of the last ice age. I have now put together the story based on evidence. And whenever if I say I believe something or I think something, it's always based on evidence that I've been piecing together, that what we had ending the Younger Dryas, ending the last ice age, was a huge eruption from the sun, a huge solar outburst, huge climatic changes, which put, among other things, a lot of precipitation, a lot of moisture into the air, which came down as precipitation with huge floods, huge essentially thunderstorms, etc. And I think a lot of the initial erosion that we still see on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure go back to that period. So you had the situation where you would get this incredible weathering and erosion, and then it continued for thousands of years after that and was reinforced until you had the Sahara coming in relatively recent times, in geologically Holocene times.
The Sahara Desert,
the Sahara Desert, yes.
So before that, it was some sort of a rainforest.
It's savanna to rainforest. It actually varied over time, and before that, it was very fertile savanna, lots of plants there. People have seen it even in popular movies and whatnot, how the Sahara at one point had water and all kinds of animals. That's before the end of the last ice age, before these incredible changes that we have at 9700 BC. So that's where the Sphinx, I think the original Sphinx, goes back to that time period, and that's what the Egyptians called Zeptepi. This was a first time for them, or what I call an earlier cycle of civilization. The last cycle, the one that we're still part of, in my terminology, is the last 5,000 years. So civilization arising, re-emerging, I should say, about 3,000 to 4,000 BC, coming into really what we have now, high technology, etc. But before that, there had been an earlier cycle of civilization that was essentially snuffed out or brought to its knees, if you would, by the end of the last ice age. And just to map this out, a period from about 9700 BC, this is what I'm reconstructing now, to about 4000 to 3000 BC, where we have civilization reemerging. Between that period, so thousands of years, 9700 BC to, say, 3700 BC for round numbers, 6,000 years, we have essentially a dark period, and what I've been now calling SIDA, solar-induced dark age. Sort of ironic, the sun would induce a dark age because it brought civilization back to an earlier stage, if you would.
I'm not sure I follow that. How did the sun do this?
Solar outburst, essentially coronal mass ejection, huge eruption, bigger than anything we've ever seen on Earth.
And so that's what caused these massive thunder showers, and
exactly.
Nothing in modern history
Nothing in modern history is even close to this, but we do have isotope data, etc., that indicates this has happened in the past at the end of the last ice age, and I'm sure it's happened many times over. And you have a lot of markers that indicate this. You have vitrification of rock. In fact, a lot of the markers, and I don't want to be debating the issue necessarily, but a lot of the markers that people have used for a comet at the Younger Dryas or during the Younger Dryas, really most of them are at the beginning of the Younger Dryas. That's what they're claiming, but a lot of the dating is very, very iffy. I found it interesting, for instance, someone will use something as a marker for the Younger Dryas, and it will give a date of 12,000 plus or minus 4,000 years. So, this is just the way geology is. But
Episode number 1394. Joe Rogan and Matt Farah discuss the mysterious Stonehenge beneath Lake Michigan, possibly built by a lost civilization.
I live down by the beach, and so for me, I legit am like, what am I going to do when the tsunami comes?
Oh, that's
I'm just waiting for the
get out of
tsunami.
there. What are you doing? Don't you know better? Get the fuck off the water, man.
Yeah, right?
Come on, you're a nice guy. I don't want to lose you.
I'm actually waiting for like waves to just come straight through my
Beachfront
house.
Pasadena, son. Get that high rise.
Yeah.
Buy some land up
your
yonder.
shit's not front row. Just wait. Just wait.
Yeah. What the fuck happens then if your address doesn't exist anymore?
Right.
Like, we all know that they find these ancient civilizations underneath
Atlantis.
the ocean. I mean, but they do find, they don't find that they've never found Atlantis, but they've found some pretty cool shit out of the ocean.
Yeah.
Do you ever see those things they found, I think in the Bahamas? It's like these stones that looks like a passageway, like cut stones.
Cut into the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These gigantic stones, looks like some sort of an underground passage or an underwater passageway.
It seems like, I remember that. I think at one point there were like probably entrances made of wood or something that, have rotted away. And then,
Yeah.
Underground stones, yeah.
I don't know. No, did they identify that those? Did they think those are man-made? Do they think that they're man-made, or are there scientists that think that that's a natural?
Isn't there?
thing?
There's a portion of that is absolutely
That's
man-made,
it. It's called
I think.
Bimini Road, right?
Yeah.
Bimini Road.
Yeah.
So is that for sure man-made?
I could swear portions of it are. That's
What do you
cool as
think?
fuck, though.
I don't know. This is just reminding me of something I just heard recently that it's never come up on here from what I remember, that there's like a Stonehenge type structure on the bottom of Lake Michigan that people found recently.
Really?
What?
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Fuck. What the fuck? I think
Joe's
somebody-
conspiracy radar just went off the fucking
These are the
charts.
kind of ones I like too. I don't like conspiracies about Epstein.
The
'cause they're
Lake
freaked
Michigan
out.
Stonehenge. Look at that.
People are still alive.
That's pretty.
There's a lot of weird pictures I've seen of this trying to look it up. They think that there's like a mastodon carving. I don't think that's the actual one.
Whoa.
I think someone added to this, but
That looks like it was done in spray paint in
I think
2018.
it's more like this
It doesn't
one.
look like a fucking
I think
cave
it's
drawing.
that.
Oh, it's that.
But I just stumbled across this online while we were on break last week, and I was like, "What? I've never heard of this."
I need to
Started
start
looking
using
and-
some of your guys' keywords to start searching for shit. I feel like my keywords are narrow when I'm doing my internet fucking time wasting, and I'm not getting the kind of results you guys are getting.
Episode number 1506. Joe Rogan and James Nestor discuss the Indus Valley civilization, ancient masters of yoga and breathwork.
So much of this technology is cheap now to get. So even if you were to show up with $2,000 worth of equipment, you could see if there was some scientific basis to what these people are doing. But from my understanding, I didn't go down the chi hole too deep, but a lot of these people aren't showing up and offering, volunteering to have their skills tested. And that's how science works. You have to test it, right? And it has to be replicable.
Well, everybody wants to be Swami Rama, but nobody wants to do what Swami Rama did, right?
Yeah, who wants to sit in a cave? Well, some people do. Sit in a cave for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
He would go away for years at a time in a dark cave and just sit there and breathe. So in the modern age, I just don't know.
Freak that guy must have been. God, I would love to have talked to him.
Yeah, he had it all down.
Because there are people that can do that. They're like the Unabomber of breathing. They just move to the woods and but without the negativity.
But what was cool about him is he wasn't the only one who could do this. So there were researchers in the 20s and in the 40s who went out with a bunch of equipment, whatever equipment they could cobble together, and tested other yogis who were able to do this exact same thing, right? So Swami was part of this long lineage of people who had this knowledge. Is it still there? It could be, but again, I don't think it's online. I think you really have to get out in the weeds and earn these people's trust in order to get that story.
And what is the history of these people doing this? Like, what was their initial motivation? I mean, is there a written history of this?
The earliest evidence that we have for breathing practices dates back about 4,000 or 5,000 years from these little statuettes in the Indus Valley, which is in northern India. So there was this huge thriving civilization. They had paved roads, they had running water, they were dealing with tin and copper, and they had in this whole civilization, they still have not found any political or governmental buildings. They haven't found any religious iconography. So these people in some ways could have been more advanced than we are now. And they had all of these figures of these people in these yoga poses with their stomachs out. So that's how they date the earliest archaeological evidence of that. And since then all of these practices were moved into the Rig Veda and all of the earliest yoga texts, and they were codified in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That's where a lot of the yoga methods come from, and that's about 2,000 years old.
So the methods predate all of that.
Oh, I'm sure they predate probably anything that has been in writing.
That's what's so curious to me. What makes me so curious? If you really think about what life must have been like back then, when they were creating this, you would think that people were hunting and gathering, and it was probably a very hard life.
Well, not in that civilization.
Right, but they got to a point where they had some sort of agriculture or some structures and buildings. But how did they get to the point? Because the rest of the world obviously didn't do this. This is not like common practice in Germany or in Italy or in all these other civilizations. Like, what made these people focus on breath work so much?
Well, it could have been, but we just haven't found anything related to that yet, right? So if you think about hunter-gatherers, we're imagining them as, man, they're just working all day, they're hunting all day, they're gathering. They weren't, from what I know and from what I've seen of the science there. Probably 3 or 4 hours of work, and then you have no other distractions to spend time and build these systems of breathing and health, which is what started in ancient China, which is what started in India, which is what started in ancient Greece. Think about all the distractions we're dealing with today. Constant interruptions. If you've already done your work for the day and there's nothing else to do, you're going to get more interested, and you're going to have the time to do some empirical studies to see what works and what doesn't.
It just seems to me that, like, learning something like that, learning something like prolonged breath work and the benefits of it, I mean, it seems like this is a really long-term practice that doesn't show you immediate benefits.
Yes and no. I think that you can take someone who has a serious problem, maybe someone who's already very fit. It's going to take a while to really see those big benefits. We see that with athletes with nasal breathing. It takes them weeks or sometimes months to really see gains in performance. But if you've got someone with a chronic condition like asthma or anxiety who are struggling to breathe every single day, and you teach them some basic breathing, some normal breathing patterns, their lives can be absolutely transformed. And we've seen this in study after study. So these people, their breathing has become so disrupted. They're breathing in such an unhealthy way that they don't know what proper breathing is. And just shifting that has a tremendous impact.
Episode number 1284, Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock discuss the ancient Serpent Mound in Ohio.
I guess this is kind of my pet phrase. We are a species with amnesia.
It's my favorite phrase of yours.
We have forgotten so much more about ourselves than we remember. And what the process of history and archaeology should really be about is a process of remembering. We shouldn't be imposing our ideas of what we should have been on the past. We should allow the past to speak for itself. And when it does so, it speaks eloquently. One of the sites that we visited and explored for America Before was Serpent Mound in Ohio. I don't know if you've ever been there, Joe.
No, I've heard of it, though.
It is an amazing...
Jamie's from Ohio. You ever be there?
Yeah, Jamie and I were talking about it earlier. There's Serpent Mound. There's an aerial view of Serpent Mound.
Oh, that is crazy.
But here's the thing.
That's beautiful.
You see the head end of Serpent Mound there? So Santha and I went there at the summer solstice in 2017. We were there on June 21st, 2017. And my wife Santha is a photographer, and we acquired a drone for this specific purpose. And she flew the drone up 400 feet above Serpent Mound, and we sat it up there watching the sunset. And what happens on the summer solstice, and you can only see it perfectly with a drone. There's pictures of it in the book here. What happens on the summer solstice? You can see it from ground level, but you get up 400 feet, you really get it. The head of that serpent is pointing directly at a niche in the distant hills through which the sun sets on the summer solstice, on the longest day of the year. So it's a sky-ground alignment, a perfection that is taking place there. It's a beautiful thing to see, to watch that sun majestically sinking down into the horizon and see this awesome figure of the serpent gazing directly at it with its jaws open, almost as though it's about to swallow the sun. And then we remember that there are other sites around the world which are also aligned to key moments of the solar year, aligned to the winter solstice. For example, the Temple of Karnak in Upper Egypt, that kilometer-long axis targets exactly the rising point of the sun on the winter solstice. One of the interesting things about Serpent Mound, and I urge anybody listening to this, go visit Serpent Mound, and especially go there on the summer solstice, because that's the moment, that's the marriage of heaven and earth. That's when sky and ground unite in majesty at that place. But one of the mysteries of Serpent Mound concerns how old is this mound really? How far back does it go? And there have been arguments that there is a group of archaeologists who would like it to be just 1,000 years old, and they attribute it to a culture called the Fort Ancient culture. There's another group of archaeologists, in my view, who've done much more thorough work, who attribute it to the Adena culture. The thing about which goes back to 2,300 years ago or so, there's evidence for an earlier construction enterprise. It looks like the site has been continuously reconstructed and remodeled, as we would do with any sacred site. If it begins to wear down, you remodel it. And then you get later organic material being introduced to the site that may give you the impression that the site is only that old. What's intriguing about Serpent Mound is it stands on a natural ridge. And that natural ridge, and this is entirely an accident of heaven and earth, that natural ridge, the head end of it, if you like, is naturally oriented to the summer solstice sunset. Somebody, a long time ago, noticed that natural orientation, and they decided to monumentalize it. Here was a place where earth whispered to sky. The earth, in her own nature, looked directly at the place on the horizon where the sun was setting. This was a highly significant place. This place mattered. So they then created Serpent Mound on top of it. They memorialized it. They turned it into a special place that human beings had a hand in making to honor the marriage of heaven and earth. And what I found researching this book is that Serpent Mound is not alone in that respect. A lot of people are puzzled by Stonehenge in England. Stonehenge is built on Salisbury Plain. And there are two kinds of big megaliths at Stonehenge. One of them are called Sarsens, and the other are called the Blue Stones. The Blue Stones, we know for sure, were brought a long way. They were brought from Wales to Stonehenge, a distance of about 150 miles. The Sarsens are found in abundance on a place called the Marlborough Downs, which is about 20 miles from Stonehenge. But until very recently, it was thought there were no Sarsens on Salisbury Plain at all, and archaeologists couldn't understand why Stonehenge wasn't built on the Marlborough Downs, where the big Sarsen stones, the 20, the 30-ton megaliths, were available locally and didn't have to be brought there. Very recent research, 2018 research, has provided the answer that two of those Sarsens were naturally in position all the time at Stonehenge, and they are Sarsen Stone 16 and the Heel Stone. And if you stand behind Sarsen Stone 16 and look at the Heel Stone at dawn on the summer solstice, you see the sun rising in direct alignment with the view. And the Heel Stone is like the sight on the barrel of a rifle targeting the sun, and that was there naturally. Earth was speaking to sky. The ancients saw that. They decided this was sacred. They went to huge lengths to bring the Sarsens, the rest of the Sarsens, from the Marlborough Downs to create the big stone circle at Stonehenge and then to put the blue stones inside it. But initially, what they were celebrating was a natural union of heaven and earth. And that brings us to the notion of as above, so below. That we are connected to the cosmos, that it is part of our heritage. We in modern cities forget the cosmos exists. We have all kinds of tech that can look at astronomy programs. We can all do that, but actually looking at the stars is something that's very difficult for people who live in cities to do. We're cut off from the cosmos. We're cut off from the notion that it is sacred, that it matters to the human creature. And what the ancients seem to have done is to realize how vital that connection is and to memorialize it and to celebrate it and to draw our attention to the intimate connection between ground and sky.
Yeah, light pollution sort of fuels our infantile existence in a lot of ways, right? Because it doesn't constantly remind us that we're a part of this great thing.
Episode number 1284. Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock discuss the 2,000-year-old Antikythera computer.
Now, when they found that ancient Greek computer thing, what is that called?
The Antikythera mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, that testifies to a lost navigational skill that we have not taken account of before.
Incredibly complex,
Yeah.
and it took a long time for them to figure out what that even is.
Yeah.
What do they think that is now?
It tracks the movements of the planets. It's a navigational device. It's a geared, cogged system that allows you to track the passage of time and figure out where you are. It's some kind of navigational device. It's not fully understood.
And
yet.
how old is that?
I think that goes back to Greek times. I'm guessing here because the Greek times are not of great interest to me, but I'm thinking around about 500 BC.
So at least 2,000 years old, 2,000 plus, and we know that there had to be more than one of these things.
Yes, you can't have something like that without a vast effort behind it.
Yeah.
Human beings were working on creating this geared and cogged machinery that reflected the patterns. in
is
the
that a
sky.
recreation of it?
That's a recreation.
Wow.
Of something like it. Yeah.
Can you buy one of those? That looks like you could buy that, dude. Bookmark that.
Yeah.
We need one right there, right next to the plasticells.
So such a thing is a cultural artifact which doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It has to have a context. It has to have a background. And again, my suggestion would be perhaps a secret technology. It's very odd that very few of these have been found, and it may be that ship owners and navigators in Greek times were extremely careful about who they shared this technology with.
Of course,
it may have been as top secret as nuclear power is in our world today.
Oh, that makes sense.
But the fact is that then we have to. It exists. It's real.
Yes.
It's there.
Yeah.
And then we must consider what's behind it. What led to that? Is that just the latest manifestation of something that goes much more deeply back into human culture? And I think that is. I suppose my main message is that we have a so far untold backstory, that we're concentrating entirely on the front story, and the backstory is missing, very largely missing from the picture. And what I've tried to do is to fill in bits of the backstory.